I'd like to call the committee to order and welcome the Minister of Health back to the committee. Thank you for coming in this morning. And you have a couple minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll go to questions from the parties. So,
well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Members of this committee have made some accusations that are simply unfounded, and I'm very happy to be here to set the record straight. First, regarding Dr. Mazza's compensation. On December 21st, 2011, I learned that Dr. Mazza had abused the trust placed in him by the taxpayers of this province. When I learned what he made in 1 year, that was enough for me to take immediate action. That's why I ordered a forensic audit into Ornge the very next day. They were on site before Christmas. Shortly after, Ornge's board of directors had resigned. A new board was in place, and Dr. Mazza was no longer working at Ornge. The second accusation relates to the findings of that forensic investigation. I reviewed the results, the interim findings of the forensic investigators in February 2012. I was shocked at what I read. Chris Mazza's deception and abuse of power clearly crossed the line. The issue was immediately referred to the Ontario Provincial Police. The final report of the forensic investigation team was delivered to my Deputy Minister in July 2012. Based on advice from the Ministry's internal audit team, this report was immediately returned, unread, and still sealed, and forwarded to the Ontario Provincial Police. This step was taken to ensure that there was no risk of inadvertent impact on the ongoing criminal investigation. There is no question that this was the right thing to do, and even with the benefit of hindsight, I continue to stand behind that decision because Chris Mazza must be held to account. Both Ornge and the Ministry of Health have taken their obligations seriously when providing documents to this legislative committee examining this issue. 2 million pages of documents have been provided to this committee. The committee has had all information about Dr. Mazza's salary and compensation and expenses since it was provided to the committee clerk in October 2012 as requested by MPP Liz Sandals. What's important to me is that we have worked hard to turn things around at Ornge. Under Ornge's new leadership, a new culture has been established that has made patient safety, transparency, and accountability for taxpayers' dollars their highest priority.
Thank you for that, and we'll move to the opposition for the, and you have about 25 minutes of total time for each party is my estimate, so
sure.
Please go ahead, Mr. Cleese.
Thank you. Minister, what specifically in the briefing note that you read was it that alerted you to concerns at Ornge? And I'm saying specifically you mentioned that all you needed to see was 1 year's income. How much was that 1 year's income that you saw in that briefing note?
Well, I think you're confusing two things. The briefing note came after the forensic audit team had been in, and it contained in the interim report. When I saw Dr. Mazza's first year's salary, that was in response to a meeting that I had with the chair of Ornge, where I demanded to know what compensation was paid to Dr. Mazza. As you will recall, there was an issue around what was on the Sunshine List and what was not. I demanded to know total compensation to Dr. Mazza. I received that shortly after that meeting in my office.
Minister, that's not what you said. That's not what you've been saying for the last 2 weeks.
That is exactly what I have been saying.
No, it's not. The record will show, the transcripts of the scrums will show that what you said was all you needed to see was what he made in that 1 year, and you specifically referred to the interim report that you read.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cleese. Once again, you are inaccurate. What I have said from the beginning is that I demanded to know what compensation was paid to Dr. Mazza. I received that information. I then appointed, or a forensic audit was ordered. Shortly after that, in February 2012, the audit reported back, and it was from that point that the police were called in.
Which audit?
The audit that was ordered after I learned what he had been paid in 1 year.
Is that the one that you did not read?
I read the interim report. That was all I needed to
And
read.
what did the
I
interim
read the
report
interim
say?
report.
What
The
did the
interim
interim
report
report say
did not
about his
address the
income?
compensation. The interim report, what concerned me in the interim report that led me to say, game over, it's time for the OPP to be involved,
Let me clarify.
was the reference to the payments made by Augusta Westland to the Ornge corporations in response to what appeared to be an overpayment by Ornge for helicopters.
Okay, we just need to get one thing clear here. You're referring to an interim report. The only interim report, so-called, that was delivered to this committee and was referred to by your deputy initially as an interim report and then subsequently clarified and referred to it as a briefing note, is this document, it's a two-page document, is that the one, just so that we're clear,
Yes.
when you say interim report, is it this two-page briefing note that you're referring to?
Yes, that is the interim report from the forensic audit team that was called in after disclosure of 1 year's salary.
And you're saying that this report made reference to the remuneration that you were concerned about?
Let me try this one more time. I got the information on remuneration in December 2011. It was that information, 1 year of Chris Maz's compensation, that prompted the audit that resulted in that interim report, that briefing note. That 2 pages, I tell you, tells a very big story that, that resulted in immediate referral to the OPP. And if you're telling me, Mr. Cleese, that you think I should have waited until the final report to take action, I completely disagree with you.
No, you know, you should have taken action 2 years before that, Minister. The issue here, the kind of backfilling that you're doing is quite offensive. The fact that you finally took action in December of 2011, when this issue was brought to your attention in April of 2011, warning you that things were going on at Ornge that, quite frankly, were highly questionable, and you, according to your own, to the Hansard, continue to defend what was going on at Ornge. For you to suggest that somehow you took a responsible step here by moving in December of 2011 is quite hilarious, actually. Now, but let's leave that where it is. I'd like to ask you this. We have, in July of this year, Ornge provided this committee with a document entitled Budget Fiscal Year 2013. Did you receive a copy of Ornge's fiscal year 2013 budget?
I certainly have been briefed on budget challenges at Ornge.
So you did not receive a copy of Ornge's budget?
I would I tell you what I have received. I have received the interim report. I have read the final report. There have been significant changes at Ornge, as I hope you will acknowledge, changes for the better.
Minister,
what I'm hoping is that this committee will actually finish the report,
Minister,
so we will have perhaps more
No,
information
Minister,
on how to improve
you're
Ornge.
here to answer our questions. I'm asking you a simple question. This is an organization that has serious financial struggles and complexities. As the minister, you're actually telling us that you have not even asked for or seen a copy of Ornge's budget for fiscal year 2013. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
What I am telling you is that I am aware there are challenges. Those challenges are being managed.
You didn't read the budget. What is the consolidated budget for Ornge for fiscal year 2013?
Mr. Cleese, I think you
Just
understand.
say you don't know if that's the case.
What I do know, what I do know, Mr. Cleese, is that Ornge is under very strong new leadership,
Minister,
new management.
you don't even
They
know
are
the budget
wrestling.
of Ornge for fiscal 2013, and you're cutting the check?
What I can tell you is that I know that Ornge is under strong new leadership. They are working their way.
People who are watching this are going to be distraught. This is an organization that has wasted multi-millions of healthcare dollars, and you don't even know what their budget is for this year.
With respect, Mr. Cleese, I think your credibility on issues related to Ornge has been severely questioned. You have raised issues in the House that are simply untrue. Just as recently as last week, you said that I was in contempt of the legislature for not having provided documents. Those documents have been provided to this committee not once, not twice, but 3 times. I actually think that you should think about your accusations before you make them.
Well, let's think about that together, okay? In a series of motions dating back to April of 2012, this committee has requested any and all documents that relate to Ornge that may be in the possession of the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance, or any other ministry. On February 15th, 2012, you received the briefing note, to which you refer as the interim document or the interim report. Why was that briefing note not made available to this committee?
That briefing note was made available to this committee. You have had that in your documents not once, not twice, 3 times you have received that document.
On July 15th, or on July 25th of this year, of 2012 rather, you received a copy of the final forensic report, and you forwarded that to the OPP without reading it. Why was that report withheld from this committee?
With respect, I did not receive that report. That report was presented to the ministerial officials who made the determination that we must not interfere or be perceived to be interfering with an OPP investigation. So I did not see that report. They made the right decision. I stand by that decision. I have a feeling that if I had read that report, then you'd be here accusing me of interfering with an investigation.
In October 2012.
What I am saying is that the forensic investigator lead appeared before this committee, answered questions, and every document that has been requested by this committee has been delivered to this committee, including the final report of the forensic investigation team. You've had that information.
The final report was delivered because we called for it last week.
That's exactly right.
In October 2012, Speaker, Ornge requested that their external accounting firm and selected executives be permitted to access that forensic report. And in response, on October 9th of 2012, the Ministry of Health asked the forensic investigation team for a copy of that report, which it received.
That is correct.
Your ministry received it. The OPP advised that this would not interfere with their investigation. Why was this committee not provided with a report at that time? That was in October of 2012.
This committee has asked for many, many, many documents, 2 million pages of documents.
And this was not important enough to forward to this committee, knowing that there's a standing order to the Ministry of Health to provide any documentation of relevance related to Ornge to this committee. Why was it withheld?
This committee has received over 2 million pages of documents.
We did not receive the forensic report.
It's clear you have not been reading, because even today, after I have said repeatedly that you had the interim report,
I'm talking about the final report. Why was the final report not provided to this committee, knowing full well that there's a standing order from this committee to provide that documentation? Why was it withheld?
When the committee requested the report, they got the report.
No. We have standing orders here, standing motions by this committee to provide any documentation relating to Ornge between the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance. We want that information. We have standing motions. And the minute that that report was tabled, it should have been delivered here. Why was it withheld?
Let me try one more time.
You don't have to try one more time. The fact is, we didn't get it. It was withheld, and I'm simply asking you as minister to tell us why it was withheld, knowing that the OPP said it would not in any way interfere with their investigation.
There was a decision made by the ministry that we did not want to interfere with an ongoing OPP investigation. As I say, that was the right decision. That was the decision that was made by the Deputy Minister in consultation with Ministry audit staff I concurred with that decision, and that decision stood until this committee requested the final report, and this committee received the final report. You have information you don't even know you have. That's clear that you're asking for information. Millions of pages have been delivered to you, and it's obvious that you have not read them because you have completely, you've
Minister,
asked for the
I've read a
same
lot more
information over
documentation,
again.
obviously, than you have. I can tell you that the documents we went through that provided information on Chris Mazza's income, and you admitted yourself that the interim report does not contain all of the information about Chris Mazza's income. The information we did receive regarding his income, including T4s, adds up to maximum $5.6 million.
I'm afraid
Where is the rest?
once again, you're demonstrating that you have not read the
Well,
documents.
then I would ask you to table with this committee the information that you say was in that document that adds up to $9.4 million. Will you do that?
Of course I will do that, but I want you to know you have that information.
Well, if you
all
have it,
of the
then table it
information
with-
that you're asking
then
for
table
today,
it.
you've had for months.
Well, if
for
you know
months you
that,
have had
Minister-
compensation, you have had
Well, you're wrong.
bonuses, you have had expenses. All of the information this committee has
And
and
you're
has
wrong.
had for a year, over a year. You have more comprehensive information than is
Minister?
contained in the forensic audit. All
Minister,
you have to
let
do
me
is
just-
read it.
Okay, Minister, if you know that that's there, then before the end of this day, I would ask you to table that information, because you obviously know where it is. That adds up to $9.4 million in compensation for Chris Mazza with this committee. Will you do that? Will you do that?
This committee has already asked for a summary of that
No.
information
Now
to be
you
contained.
see, now you're admitting that you don't know.
You are
And
absolutely
we know.
incorrect. This committee
Then
has
you'll table
been.
it. Just say yes or no. Will you table it?
I will.
Yes or
You
no?
have the information. You will receive it again. The committee
Thank
has
you.
already asked for a summary chart to be prepared. That work is underway. You
I'm
have the
telling you.
information, and if you need it again, we'll get it to you again.
I want that information from the information that was tabled, according to you, with this committee prior to receiving the forensic report. And so thank you for that. We'll look for that before the end of the day.
Will you undertake to read it this time?
I have read it, Minister.
Well, if
you
you'd
don't
read
have to
it-
insult me.
if you'd
I'm
read
not
it,
the
you
one,
would know
I'm
it's
not the
there.
one who has failed in my oversight responsibilities. You're the one who has done that. The record is very clear on that. So we'll look forward to getting that information that you say was in the records.
So let me
All these
just ask you one
persons.
question. If in
Okay,
fact
we
you are
will,
convinced.
we will move on to the NDP then. Ms. Jelinek, you have up to 25 minutes.
Thank you. I will be splitting my time. Thank you for coming this morning, Minister. I want to take you back in December of 2011. So we all read with horror the stories in the Toronto Star that told us the salary that Mazza had been paid. I understand that you met with the Board of Ornge shortly thereafter, and they were able to confirm to you that Mr. Mazza, for 1 year, had received close to $1.4 million.
It was actually reverse order, but yes.
Okay, tell me the right order then.
So the right order was there were questions raised about compensation to Dr. Mazza. The Auditor General was having difficulty getting information from Ornge. So I called in the chair of the board. I called in Dr. Mazza. He did not come. I called in senior personnel at Ornge and demanded that they cooperate with the Auditor General, that they provide information, and that, including compensation paid to Dr. Mazza. Shortly after that meeting, they provided that information, 1 year's compensation. That was all I needed to know that there were very serious problems regarding responsibility at Ornge. It was when I received that 1 year compensation number, that is when the forensic audit was ordered. And it was then 6 or 7 weeks later that the interim report was received, and that it was following that the OPP were called in to do a very thorough criminal investigation.
Okay, so you talked to the board and demanded that information regarding Mazza's salary be shared with you, and it is shared with you. And is it still in the $1.5 million range? Is this what was shared with you at the time?
You have all of the information. What has been publicly reported is accurate.
Is what was shared
This
with you.
committee has all of that information.
Yeah, okay, so that information came up to about $1.4 million at the time. We now know that it is closer to 2.5 million. This is but at the time, what was in the paper and what prompted you to act was really 1.4 million is completely inappropriate for the head of Ornge to be paid, and that trigger all of the action. This information being on the front page of the paper for such a long time, not only did it had an effect on you that you knew you needed to act, but it also had an effect on a lot of people who care about healthcare, who saw that and who wonder, like, this man needs to be held to account. Things needs to happen. But then, as the investigation goes on, more and more questions surface about his pay. The effect it had on you, Minister, the same effect it had on millions of Ontarians. So my question really is, how come you didn't see fit to share those amounts publicly? You know, like, people wanted to know. To find this out by dribble at the time by investigative reporters when those numbers were quite easy to read. I can read them off of the report. It's in a nice, tiny little tables for all to see here that had been done in a report given to you. Why is it that we had to wait till it hit the front page of the paper rather than coming from you?
So I think two things. I completely agree that Dr. Mazza needs to be held to account. That's why it's very important to me that the criminal investigation be allowed to proceed without any suggestion of political interference. That's very important to me. This committee has had information about compensation to Dr. Mazza. It was tabled over a year ago in response to a question from Liz Sandals. So this committee actually has had that information for over a year.
It doesn't add up. I can tell you that I did do my homework. I did read the documents. I looked at what has been submitted to us as to how much he was paid, how much was his stipend, how much he got paid from through the back door, through the hospital, and all of this. It does not add up to what the forensic audit was able to unearth on this. It doesn't add up. I can guarantee you that I have done my homework. I have read. I went through all of his OHIP billing sheets. I spent a lot of time looking at his salary because salary was the trigger, but I'm not a forensic auditor. They were way better than us.
So what I can tell you is that the request from this committee was for all compensation, not just what you'd find on T4s. It included loans, it included stipends, it included expenses, so all of his credit card expenses. All of that information wrapped up. This committee has had all of that information. I can tell you this committee has more information than the forensic auditor had reports in his report. So what you've seen publicly reported, I think is, I understand, to be accurate. You have asked for a summary sheet to be prepared. That is being prepared for you now.
Minister, I just want to confirm a couple of things with you, and I'm sure you would agree. So you would agree that you agree that the salary was the trigger that made you realize there was something wrong at Ornge?
Yes.
Do you agree? And you agree that, and you believe in transparency and accountability. That's something you believe in. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And you would agree that you'd want Ontarians to know exactly what the figures are, so the Ontarians could be able to look and see that this is the salary, this is the compensation, to hold Dr. Mazza to account, but also to hold the government to account. Would you agree with that? That's something that Ontarians deserve to see.
Yes.
And you know that the OPP allowed or gave you the permission or said that there would be no problem with disclosing the information held in the report. They told you that. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. They
Okay.
did not tell me that.
Who did they
This
tell?
document was in the ministry.
Sure.
And when the ministry received the the audit final report in July of 2012.
Right.
The decision was made on advice from the internal audit team at Ministry of Health that that should be returned and referred to the Ontario Provincial Police. I did not see that report. That was the understanding then and continued until this committee received the final report, that there would be no suggestion of political interference in a criminal investigation.
I can clarify that. I think OPP contacted you in May 2013 and advised that it was okay to release the report.
Again, they did not contact me.
So just in general, you were aware that the OPP had indicated that there was no problem in releasing the report in May of 2013. Do you agree with that statement?
What I can tell you is
Just
that...
with respect to that statement, though, that the OPP
No, the OPP did not contact me.
Not you, but that the OPP had made it clear that there was no problem with releasing the report in May of 2013. Are you aware of that, though?
I'm aware, and you've got the transmittal letter, I believe, from
That's
from Deputy
And so
Minister
I'm reading
Raffi.
off of that, and that's
so he makes it very clear what the chain of events were. As far as I'm concerned.
So you would agree, though, that the OPP has made it clear that in May of 2013 that there was no problem in releasing the forensic report?
So, as I say, I can speak only to what I know.
No, but
And what
do you
I
agree
know-
that statement, that you've read that statement and you are aware that the OPP has said in May of 2013 that it's okay to release the report?
It's at the bottom of page 4, just before the graft of all the dates, the letter from the deputy to the clerk, and it goes to say that Mr. Tate confirmed to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care that the OPP advised him at that time, which is May 2013, that they did not believe that release of the report would have a negative impact on the investigation.
So what I can tell you is what I know, and what I know is that a decision was made that there ought not be any perception of political interference. That was an understanding that stood until this committee requested that document. When you received it, I received it.
Except that it changed. It changed a year later. In May of 2013, the OPP changed their position and say releasing the report is not going to have an impact on their investigation. So from May of 2013 to now, things had changed, but things did not change for you.
So to make it clear, the OPP made it clear that they're okay with releasing it, and they advised Alan Tate, the director of the FIT, the forensic interim report, indicating that there was no problem in releasing it. If you did not know about that, you can indicate that, but it's pretty clear in this letter that we received that they contacted the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and confirmed to the ministry that the OPP didn't have a problem with that. Were you aware of that confirmation or not?
No, I was not.
Okay.
What I've said, what I've been very clear, is that my highest priority was that Dr. Mazza be held to account for his actions. That meant there had to be an OPP investigation that was free from political interference or the perception of political interference. That is why I did not see the interim report, and I did not see it until this committee requested it and this committee received it. You had Mr. Tate here in front of you last May. I do not believe you requested that report. When you requesed for that report, you received
Minister,
that
we're not
report.
worried about what we as a public account, we're not looking to see if the public account is held up to the standard, what the ministry is supposed to do. The questions that we're asking is, did the ministry do their job? Did you as the minister do your job in terms of oversight and accountability? Whether we asked the questions or not, or did the work or not, is not actually the subject of what we're here to do. Just to let you know.
You have to realize how bad it looks. I mean, for 2 years, Ornge is trying to rebuild from the ashes that are left behind, trying to do some good. And then when bits of information trickles out like this, that truly you could have prevented all of that. Then we see a pattern developing. You know, like you could have prevented Ornge to be run into the ground in the first place had you done something with the red flags and the whistleblower. You could have prevented Ornge from running themselves into the ground had you looked into his salary when the NDP asked you to look into this. but it didn't, and then Ornge happened. Now you see that this information becomes available. The OPP says it's now okay to share it, but because the public hear it through the media rather than through you, it again looks like the Ministry of Health is not overseeing, it's not doing its basic function of oversight of an important agency such as Ornge. The optic is so bad when you know that so many people are interested into this issue, that the salary that had been put out there has been 1.4. You now have a document in front of you that says in 2011 it was 2.571,844-72 that he got paid. $2.5 million is a whole lot more than 1.4. You know, like, had you been upfront to show, I am showing oversight, I am the one who will release that information and share it, we wouldn't be here this morning.
So with respect, all of that information, in fact, far more than the information, if we're talking about compensation, this committee has had that for over a year.
It's not our job to oversee Ornge, it's yours.
So let's be clear, there is an ongoing criminal investigation. Ministry officials, with advice from our internal audit team, made the determination that there ought not be political interference. I concurred with that decision, and that was the standing understanding that the OPP would be permitted to do their work.
How come when the OPP changed their stance and advised the ministry that it is now okay to release that documentation, how come you were not more like forthcoming with that kind of information to show that the ministry is on top, to show that the ministry has learned, it's doing oversight, and that the public, as my colleague says, the public is allowed to know that Maza was paid $2.57 million in 2011, not the 1.4.
So, once again, the ministry officials made that determination. So neither I nor my office was informed that the OPP said, made any statement at all. When this committee requested and received the report, that is when I received the report. But I think it's important to know that the forensic report was shared with a very small number of ministry officials. They went through the forensic audit report. They compared any findings of the forensic audit report with work that had already been done through the performance agreement.
Just so that you don't lose your train of thought, you said that you were not aware that your ministry, the OPP, did contact the government, who contacted your ministry and said that it's okay now to share the report. Wouldn't you have been curious at this point to read it and then, you know, like take your responsibility of oversight and say, hey, the number that is out there, it's actually worse. That would bolster your case that you want to hold Maza to account. When the OPP contact the government, we have Mr. Tate on record saying that he contacted the Ministry of Health and advised the Ministry of Health that the OPP was okay with sharing the report. The report that has a table in it that showed that $7.6 million were paid to Maza. We have the salary, the bonus, the fees, the loan, the OHIP. We have it all in a clear little box here.
So let me repeat. The ministry officials were as determined as I was to ensure that justice be done, that there be a clear OPP investigation free from political interference. The ministry did receive that forensic audit report. Later in July, it was returned unopened. It came back. The ministry officials reviewed the findings of the forensic audit report.
And nobody clued in?
Let me please.
Sure.
They compared the findings of the forensic audit with action already taken at Ornge and determined that no further action needed to be taken as a result of the findings of the forensic audit. That was a valuable piece of information for the OPP. I think the principle of allowing that investigation to continue unimpeded by political interference, was the right principle, it was the right decision, and I think had I not taken that position, you would be asking me, why did you interfere with an OPP investigation? Isn't it important to you that Dr. Chris Mazza be held to account?
So I'm just going to ask you a different line of questioning, just to bring us back to focus. So once Ornge hit the headlines, you realized in the Toronto Star and in other news agencies, you realized this was a big deal. That was something you should put your focus to and your attention to. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And knowing that this was something that was quite concerning to the public, to the people of Ontario, this was has been labeled a scandal. It was your intention or your concern to make sure that you were as up to date as possible about anything that occurred in Ornge. That was something that you were concerned with. Do you agree?
What was important to me was two things. First of all, that
But just in
Ornge-
general,
No,
we
no,
can get into the
because-
details in a moment.
No.
I'll let you do that. Just my question, generally speaking, is that, of course,
Would you let me
knowing that it was
answer your question, please?
certainly, but I just want to direct you to what I'm looking for. Is that were you concerned? Was there concern in your mind, given the fact that this was a big concern to the public, this was in the newspapers, there was allegations that this was a scandal. In your mind as the minister, this was something you took quite seriously. Do you agree with that general sense? And we can get into details.
Absolutely.
Of course, and I expect you would. So would you not agree then that any correspondences between whether it's the OPP, whether it's Ornge, whether it's anything that has to do with Ornge, would be something that you would pay attention to, that you would be expected to have some knowledge
No,
about?
I do not. What my job was, two issues. One, get Ornge back on track. Patients are counting on Ornge to deliver high-quality emergency care. So that's why a new leadership team was put in place, a new CEO, a new board, entirely new organization at Ornge, who then got to work undoing the damage that was caused by earlier mismanagement and making the organization stronger. So that was absolutely my responsibility, make sure Ornge is under strong new leadership and let them do their
Sure.
work. In addition,
No, you said
referral
it.
to the forensic audit
Sure,
team.
sure.
That
So-
was an important step. I wasn't managing that. The forensic audit team was managing that as well they should.
Okay.
And then when it progressed from the forensic investigation to an OPP investigation, I absolutely let the OPP do their work. That's the right and responsible thing for a minister to do.
So my question is not that about letting certain people do their job. You have to delegate. That's important. But my question is that you throughout this would have been keenly aware or keenly interested in what was happening throughout, and you should be expected to know what's going on. Maybe not to be doing the forensic audit yourself. I'm not suggesting you should do that, and nor am I suggesting you should be doing the OPP investigation yourself. I'm suggesting, broadly speaking, that you should be expected to know what's going on with respect to the Ornge investigations, who's investigating it, and what the updates are. You would expect to know that as the minister. We would expect you to know that. Do you agree with that statement? To know what's being investigated, who's investigating it, to make sure that work is being delegated, and to know what the correspondences are between the people about the investigation. Would you expect, should the public expect the minister to know about that?
So, well, the forensic...
But just focus on that question, though.
Yes.
My question is, would
Yes.
the public expect the
So
Minister of Health and Long-Term Care to know about those things?
While the forensic audit was underway, I received regular updates on the forensic audit.
That's exactly
the
what I'm looking for.
moment it was sent to the OPP was the moment I stopped getting updates because it was in the hands of the police. There was a criminal investigation
Okay, so I'll
underway.
pause you there. So once you know that it's in the hands of the police, wouldn't it be very important to know what the police, their concerns are? If the police are no longer concerned, if the police are concerned, if the police are saying that it is sensitive material, or if the police say it's no longer sensitive material, wouldn't it make sense for the public to expect the minister to be aware of that, to be aware of the status of the investigation, to know whether or not it's sensitive or whether it's no longer sensitive? Because if you know that as the minister, then you can make statements or not make statements. Wouldn't it be fair in the minds of the public to expect the minister to know whether or not the information is sensitive or not?
I
Wouldn't
think
that
the
make sense?
public would expect the minister to let the OPP do
No,
their
but that's not my
work.
question, though. No, in fairness, I'm saying that.
I
wouldn't it
did
be
not
fair?
look to updates
No,
for
wouldn't it be
updates from the
fair, though?
OPP.
But wouldn't it be fair if you care about the investigation and you don't want to interfere with it? Wouldn't it naturally make sense then to know whether or not the information is sensitive or not? Wouldn't that be something that naturally would make sense to do? Because if you are concerned about the investigation, wouldn't it make sense to ask the OPP? Or if the OPP contacts your ministry and tells you certain information is no longer sensitive, wouldn't it make sense that you should know that so that you can actually make statements or not? You can actually tailor your submissions or tailor what you want to say based on knowing the fact of whether or not the OPP is concerned about sensitivity. Wouldn't that make sense naturally?
I tell you.
But that's what I'm saying to you. Does that make sense?
What makes sense?
Not what makes sense. Am I saying, what I'm saying to you, does that make sense? Because you can talk about anything else you want, and we can do that on another day, but I'm asking you a question. Does what I say to you,
No, it does not.
So the fact that...
I'll give you an example, so that we now know that the OPP feels that it is okay to share this information. One of the information in the report is that they cheated on the Sunshine List. The last time that Maz's salary was reported on the Sunshine List, we now have the forensic audit team telling us that what they reported to the Ministry of Finance and what was published was not accurate. They cheated. For 2 years, they cheated. The last 2 years that his salary is on the Sunshine List, the salary that we have, according to the forensic audit, is not what is on the public record. So that has nothing to do with the rebuilding of Ornge. It has to do with you using the information that you have to say, oh, there's a red flag here. If they are cheating on the Sunshine List, maybe others are cheating, because you know what? Ontarians, when they read this in the paper, this is what they think.
So I think it's really important to note that the $2.5 million you referenced in compensation was not just compensation, not just, it included loans, it included a lot of information, right?
Yes.
And I think it's also important that some of that information that you, the committee has, T4 slips, you can do what you want with that information. I am prohibited from revealing that information, but you have that information.
I'm not talking about 2011. I'm talking his salary back in 2006 and 2007.
And you have 1 minute left.
So what I'm saying is that here again, there are opportunities to learn from what happened at Ornge. It has nothing to do with the way we run air ambulance. It now has to do with agencies that has to report on the Sunshine List that have cheated. You have this information in the forensic...
I think, just to be clear, and you have the forensic audit report, so you know that the organizations that were considered part of the captured under Sunshine List did report. And I think it's also important that you know that now, under the new agreement, all compensation paid through any entities is reported.
What about the 1,000 transfer payment agencies that you fund? How do you know that they're not cheating on the Sunshine List? What have you learned from this to make sure that there isn't other cheaters and other oranges out there?
So I think you would agree, and you have agreed in the past, that when I became aware of the issue, I acted swiftly, I acted decisively.
Are there other oranges out there?
And we'll move to the government now.
Thank you.
Ms. Jazik.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us today. I'll start off, and I think my colleagues will have a few more questions. The reason that you are here today really stems from the fact that you made a decision not to read the final report. So instead of peppering you with leading questions, as the opposition has done, I would like you to tell us in your own words, starting back from the beginning, when you first heard that the Auditor General was having difficulty obtaining information related to Ornge. Tell us in your own words what you knew when, in a chronological fashion. I know it's difficult because so much has happened since, but if you can put yourself back into where you were at every step of the way, I think this would be leading up to the decision not to read the final report. If you could just recap that for us.
Well, thank you, and I welcome the opportunity to do that. I heard from the Auditor General that he was having difficulties getting information from Ornge. I had a very unusual conversation with the Auditor General, and he said that he was getting very legalistic responses. He was not getting access to the information that he needed to do his work. And of course, when you don't get information, you're concerned there's a reason you're not getting information. So when I had that conversation with the Auditor General, I called in the senior leadership at Ornge, and I said, you must cooperate with the Auditor General, and I need to know how much money you are paying in compensation to Dr. Mazza, because it was clear that he was no longer on the Sunshine List, that there was more compensation being paid to him than was being reported. So I got that information on December 21st. The next day, the forensic audit team, not the Auditor General's team, the forensic audit team was called in, went to work at Ornge. By the middle of February, they came back with an interim report, their interim findings, very alarming findings, alarming enough for me to make the determination that this was a job for the OPP ministry connected. This matter was referred to the OPP. That was where it belonged, because it was very important to me that we sent a very clear signal that this is not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. Prior to that February date where we received the interim report, the board had resigned. Chris Mazza was no longer working there. There was new leadership in place at Ornge. So then, get the interim report. It was referred to the OPP. At that point, the clear responsibility from my point of view was to let the OPP do their work. There were important changes that need to be made at Ornge in order to assure the highest quality of care, responsibility and oversight at Ornge. There was a lot of work happening to get Ornge back on the right track. But in terms of the investigation into what had been going on at Ornge, that was in the hands of the OPP. I wanted that work to be done free of political interference, and when the report came back, the final report from the forensic investigation team, it went from an audit to an investigation. When the investigation team had their final report, the ministry officials made a very deliberate, in my opinion, correct decision that should be not read, that be referred to the OPP. It was returned unopened, uncopied, unread to the OPP so they could do their investigation. A few months later, in October, the Ornge wanted a copy of that report because they had to wrap up their audited statements and so on. So that information was requested. Ornge did get a briefing under high security. There were 4 copies sent to the ministry of the final report. It was very, very, very tightly controlled, and the principle that there not be interference with the OPP investigation stood, and that report was not shared with my office. It was not shared with me because we didn't want to taint a criminal investigation. So. Does that?
Yes, that
yes.
I guess just one piece. Were you informed that the final report had arrived in your office?
No, I was not.
You were not even aware that
no.
it had? You have now read the final report.
Yes, I have.
Is there anything, having now read the final report, that you would change, looking back at the actions that you took subsequent to this whole interest in Ornge? Is there anything that you would change, having now read the final report? Would you do anything differently than from what you did?
The final report confirmed that the right decision was made. This clearly was an issue that should have been investigated by the police. The decision to send it to the police was the right decision. I am convinced that the right decision was to send it to the police based on the interim findings, not to wait for the final report, because I think you would agree, having read both, that the issues raised in the interim report were fleshed out and expanded upon in the final report, but the core issues were clear in the interim report. That belonged with the OPP.
And of course, we've concentrated on the OPP investigation, the forensic audit, but many other actions have occurred in relation to Ornge since then within the ministry. I'm thinking of the performance agreement, Bill 50, Bill 11. Could you just again confirm the type of actions that you as minister took to ensure that Ornge got back on track?
Absolutely. So, as I have said, completely new team, very highly qualified, board of directors, very highly qualified senior management, a clear focus on patient safety. They have taken a number of steps. They report on performance indicators. We have a much stronger performance agreement with them now so that we have a clear line of sight into operations at Ornge. We have legislation before the House, Bill 11, that I would dearly love to see passed because it takes us to the next level. It would allow us, for example, to appoint a supervisor, like a right that we have with hospitals, not one I like to exercise very often, but if there is something happening in a hospital that is cause for concern, I can send in a supervisor. I would like the minister to have that power when it comes to Ornge as well. That is contained in Bill 11, and that is before the House now. So it's important to me that that legislation get passed. We have a patient advocate in place now. The patient advocate's job is to make sure that patients get answers to any questions they might have around the care that they received with Ornge. So there is a lot of work underway at Ornge. It is a new chapter. There is no question about it. And I think this committee has heard from frontline staff that they see a big difference in the way that Ornge is being managed now.
Would you personally have contact with Board Chair Delaney, Dr. McCallum? You know, you've talked about strong oversight. Can you sort of explain to us the various levels that oversight occurs at?
Yes, I do have regular meetings. My ministry officials have even more contact, but I do meet with Mr. Delaney. I do meet with Dr. McCallum. We do make sure that Ornge is doing what it ought to be doing.
And in terms of, we know there's a new oversight branch. In terms of the reporting from that oversight branch, are you confident that that information is passed up the line to the relevant ADM, deputy minister, and so on?
Absolutely. And if there are issues that need to be addressed, then I am informed of that.
You mentioned the change in culture, and we certainly did hear from many individuals that they see a difference in terms of what's happening at Ornge now. Do you have any particular message in terms of what you would like to say to the current staff at Ornge after all these troubles?
You know, I have such a respect and admiration for the people at Ornge. I have heard, they have shared stories with me about how they've been treated in their orange uniform. I think it's just very sad and very disappointing that there are people who still want to run Ornge down and run down the frontline staff. I have nothing but the deepest respect and admiration for people who have devoted their lives to saving the lives of others. The frontline staff at Ornge have done only their very, very best under admittedly difficult circumstances under the former leadership, and as the some people have chosen to taint the reputation of this organization. That is unconscionable to me. So my message to frontline staff is, on behalf of Ontarians, we are very, very proud of you, and we are grateful to you for the work you do, because every single day a life is saved thanks to the work of the people at Ornge.
We'll reserve our time, Chair.
Okay, very well. We'll move to the opposition then. Mr. Cleese,
Yes,
you have
thank
10
you.
minutes.
So just to reconfirm, Minister, you do not know what the budget is for Ornge for the fiscal year 2013?
I would be more than happy to get you that number to the penny.
I find it quite disturbing that you wouldn't know that. Minister, the briefing note that you read in February referred to a $275 million bond offering that we're all familiar with that was issued in June of 2009, and your briefing note showed that that was one of the key issues. Do you recall how much in interest alone had been paid on that bond in just 32 months?
That number is in my materials. I will get that number for you. I suspect you have it.
Well, I have it.
Yes.
I thought you might remember what that is, at least in a ballpark. Have you got a ballpark sense of what it was?
I will certainly get you the accurate number.
It was $47 million plus. Do you recall what the note said about where those funds came from to pay the interest? That was just interest alone over about a 3-year period of time. Do you recall what the note said about the source of the funds to pay that interest?
The vast majority of funding for Ornge came from the Ministry of Health.
So it was 100% actually of that interest payment. Do you recall what the annual payments on that bond are?
You know, let me just get that information for you.
No, but Minister, you don't have to get it for me. I have it here. I want to know if you know.
Well, if this is a quiz and you've got the cheat
No, it's
sheet,
not a
then
quiz.
let me get the cheat sheet
It's
too.
a $22 million annual payment out of the budget of Ornge. This is not a quiz, Minister. You knew about the $1 million of salary that was paid to MAZA, but you don't know about a $22 million annual payment on a bond offering. That is part of the budget.
I actually have that information.
Well, no, you
You
obviously
have that
didn't have
information.
it.
You know, Mr. Cleese, you are...
Do you recall the number of years that those payments have to be made under that budget?
You know what I do recall?
No, you don't recall.
I do
I'll
recall
tell you,
that
it's
you have
21
made
years,
several
it's 21
accusations
years,
that
and it
impugn the
amounts to more
integrity
than
of
a
the
half
people
a
at
billion
Ornge.
dollars.
If we could have one person talking at once, that'd be great.
And you don't know. And that's disturbing. And what's disturbing is after 2.5 years of hearings over this issue, and after we had the Auditor General's report that wrote scathingly about the lack of oversight on your part and the part of your ministry over this organization, you still are at arm's length from this. You still don't know some of the most fundamental aspects of this operation. That is what's disturbing to us. You haven't learned anything, Minister.
Let me tell you what's disturbing to me. When you make allegations in the
It
House
doesn't matter what's
about
disturbing
the
to you.
tail rotors
You're
of
here-
helicopters
you are
coming
here-
off,
you are here
and
to
then
answer
we
questions.
discover
Would you
that,
please?
that your accusations do not
Well-
apply to the kind of helicopters Ornge flies, your credibility is shrinking
Well,
daily.
I'm
I have to
I'm
say,
happy to let
you
the public determine
you
whose
talked about a
credibility-
If we
crash.
could have one person talk at once, so...
Chair, if you could, you know, if you would remind the minister that she's here not to pontificate, but she's here to answer questions. And the fact that she refuses to answer questions indicates she doesn't know the answers. If you knew the answers, Minister, you would just simply straightforwardly answer them. Now, I'm asking something that's very critical to the budget of Ornge, and that is that the payment on that bond offering will amount to more than $500 million. And most of that $500 million is to pay for those 10 helicopters, which is about 3 times what it should cost. Now, here's my question to you. Who, at the end of the day, is responsible for the bond offering repayment to the bondholders?
I believe that Secretary Wallace has appeared before this committee and answered that question.
He did, and so did you. 5 months after reading that, in fact, 100% of the payments for that interest on that bond offering came from the Ministry of Health, and knowing full well that the benefits of that bond offering went to pay for the helicopters to deliver Ministry of Health Services. You testified here that there is no liability on the part of the government on that bond. Yes, Mr. Wallace testified the same. I would like to ask our auditor, based on what she knows about that bond offering, about the fact that 100% of the payments have come from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Health Services are delivered, whether or not the Ministry of Health and the government are in fact liable for that bond offering. I'd ask the Auditor General.
Auditor?
I think it goes back to 2007-8. The statements for Ornge Ambulance have been consolidated into the province's summary financial statements. So back in 2007-8, there was a look to see who controlled Ornge. And the decision, I think, that was made by the Ministry of Finance in consultation with, I think, this office, as well as an external consultant, indicated that Ornge's statements would be consolidated. So from an accounting perspective, the debt is recorded on the books of the province today.
And the fact that the debt is recorded on the books of the province today, is it fair to say that the province ultimately is responsible for repayment of that debt?
I think it goes back to the point of funding. Over 90 some odd % of the funds from the province flowed into Ornge, and the province was responsible for the interest and debt repayment. And as a result of that, from an accounting perspective, the province takes ownership of the debt from an accounting perspective.
Thank you, Auditor. Minister, the reason I wanted to have that clarified on the record is because even after 2.5 years of testimony, we hear from you and a straightforward question about whether or not your ministry is responsible for that more than $500 million debt. You even deflect that. And you refer us back to testimony that was inaccurate. And I don't know why people are lining up within our civil service to somehow protect or cause a deflection of responsibility. I just don't understand that. One would have expected that when we find out what this rogue agency has been up to, that rather than defend what's going on, rather than continue to deflect, and you, as minister, rather than continue to have to stand up and say, I don't know what the budget is, I don't know what our obligations are under the bond issue, rather than simply say, look, I'm going to inform myself. That's my responsibility. And the one lesson I've learned as minister over the last 2.5 years is that, yes, we have to delegate responsibility to people to do the job, but it's my responsibility as minister to ensure they're doing their job and to hold them accountable. And when I asked the question as to how many times you've met with the chair and how many times you've met with the CEO of Ornge, your new people appointed, you couldn't answer that. I don't understand why you wouldn't have monthly meetings with these people. I'm going to ask you another question. There was a time when there were monthly reports to Cabinet. We tabled the document here. It was entitled Confidential Report to Cabinet. And it laid out all of the incident reports of Ornge. Does Cabinet continue to get those monthly reports?
And you have 1 minute left.
You don't know. Obviously, if Cabinet got those
answer.
reports, you would be able to say yes. You don't even know that.
Minister, go ahead.
Ornge reports critical incidents to the ministry. Incidents are reported also, if they involve a death, to the coroner. That
When was the
work
last
is
time you
ongoing.
saw that report?
I see a number of reports, and I am kept very much up to date on issues related to Ornge, as I am with other parts of the Ministry of Health. I just do have to take exception to a statement you made that impugned the integrity of the entire Ontario Public Service.
I'm happy to make that statement
I
because
think
the evidence
I
is
just
very
want
clear
I just
that
want
they were not forthright with this committee when a very straightforward question was asked. The Auditor General has just contradicted their testimony, your testimony, the testimony of Mr. Wallace, the testimony of your deputy. Something is not right here. What you should be doing is exercising oversight responsibilities, not defending the indefensible. And
what I
that's
can
why
tell you is
we
that I
continue to have
exercised
concern
oversight
about
when
what's
I
going on.
replaced the board.
Minister, you can answer. We'll move to the government now. You have 13 minutes, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, would you like to try and use your time here to just answer that before I ask a question?
Thank you. I have exercised strong oversight. As I understand it, you are suggesting that I ought not to have reported to the OPP when I saw the interim report. You think I should have waited for the final report. I will not apologize for referring that interim report to the Ontario Provincial Police. It was the right action to take. It was the right action then, and it would be the right action if I were to take it now.
So, Minister, I guess as a government member, I just have a bit of an opening comment and then a couple of questions. I think we have about 12 minutes left, Mr. Chair.
That's correct.
I think the issue of agencies is in play here generally. I think all of us as government members and opposition members feel challenged from time to time, especially on the government side. I don't think the public understands that there are somewhere north of 600 agencies in the province of Ontario, and the issue relative to oversight of all of these agencies from multiple ministries and the fact that we don't necessarily operate them on a day-to-day basis is something that probably the public does not understand. But as government members who are held to be responsible for the actions of hundreds of these agencies, it's a challenge for all of us. I don't think there's any disagreement from anybody that what was going on at Ornge was reprehensible, hence your decision to call in the OPP. And the fact that Dr. Mazza is being held to account for what appears certainly to be years of reprehensible activities is fine by all of us. I think it's fair to say. I think one of the things that I'm amazed by is that the notoriety that has come to Dr. Mazza, while it's justified, he has become the lightning rod for all of it. And it would seem to me, and perhaps you can make a comment on this, that his notoriety is justified. But for this web of companies and deceit and activity to have continued for this period of time, it would seem to me there's got to be a few more people involved than just Dr. Mazza. And it would seem to me that there's either just profound incompetence or blissful ignorance or just turning the other way when it comes to what was going on at Ornge. And so maybe I'll just ask if you wanted to make a comment on that so we can, perhaps provide a bit of scope to what's going on here.
So, you're absolutely right. There are hundreds of agencies. In addition, we would have over 150 hospitals. A lot of organizations do their work, and we have in place oversight. I can tell you that that this issue around Ornge is enormously troubling. And as you read in the forensic audit report, the web of companies that the forensic audit team discovered even 2 more entities as they were doing their audit. Clearly, the things that was a serious problem. A serious problem. We rely heavily on our boards, whether it's our hospital boards or our agency boards, to provide that kind of oversight. In addition, within each ministry, there are report backs. But when a board goes rogue, deliberately creates entities, it appears, so that salaries could be hidden, deliberately creates entities that that are there not for the benefit of the public, but for the benefit of the people there, that is a very serious problem. So I am very pleased with the new leadership at Ornge. I have absolute confidence. They're all there. The new board are all there on a volunteer basis. They have nothing to gain from the actions at Ornge other than the sense of satisfaction that comes with providing an excellent service to the people of Ontario.
Sorry to interrupt. The auditor would like to make a comment if it's fine.
Is it using our time?
No, I'll pause your time.
All right.
I just wanted to clarify something based on what Mr. Cleese had said. I was saying from an accounting perspective what the issue was. So from an accounting perspective, the debt is recorded on the province's statements. I'm not a lawyer, so from a legal perspective, I can't give legal comment on this. The only thing I could say on that front is that if the province didn't want the assets and the assets went back, that could likely happen under that type of debt arrangement. If the province wanted the assets, then they would continue the payment. But my comments were strictly on an accounting basis, and I'm not a lawyer to comment on the legal basis. So I don't necessarily think I've contradicted the minister. I'm just adding clarity to the discussion here by making these comments.
So could I just ask then, Peter Wallace made a statement here in 2012. He said, from a Government of Ontario perspective, with respect, we were assured, we understand factually that there is adequate insulation from the province's credit. So Secretary of Cabinet Wallace made that statement. The member from Newmarket Aurora has claimed that you have contradicted that statement. Have you in fact contradicted that statement?
I have not contradicted. I'm just supplementing it by saying that it would depend on whether the province, I think, wanted to keep the assets or not. But I think it requires a legal opinion as to how the debt was structured, because I am speaking to an issue that I was not involved in a few years ago. So from an accounting perspective, I'm pretty clear. From a legal perspective, I would say who wants the assets. If the province wants the assets, they continue paying. But from a legal interpretation of how those assets were sheltered in the way that the debt was structured, there's a legal opinion that's required there.
Okay, we'll move back to the government. Mr. Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, so you called in the OPP, and you did that. The $1.3 million number, I think, fair to say, was the trigger. And somewhere in that chronology, that was the trigger, or one of the triggers that prompted you to call it.
So when I learned how much he made, and as I say, I'm not at liberty to disclose that number, but I think media reports have been accurate.
The reason I just mention it is because today in their questions, the opposition members on committee spent a fair bit of time of their 25 minutes each questioning the difference between the 1.3 and whatever it actually is and this 2.5 number that's out there now. And the fact that somewhere in this chain of events, the OPP communicated back to the ministry that disclosure of that number according to the OPP or other information in the report according to the OPP was fine if the ministry or the minister would have disclosed that. So they spend a fair bit of time on that point. I'm left to guess that they clearly feel that's important, and I think what the implication was that somehow the ministry was holding back information. But the reason I opened by saying that at $1.3 million, you'd already called in the OPP, or whatever that number is that you can't disclose, if there's a higher number, why in anyone's name would you, as the implication seems to be, want to prevent disclosure of that? The principle that you were standing on, it seems, is that on ministry advice and on your own personal take, I would guess, the OPP are involved, it is now hands-off. That's generally a principle that all of us as government members are advised. Once there's legal ongoings, you stay hands-off. If someone's a crook at $1.3 million, they're going to be a crook at $2.5 million. So quite frankly, I didn't necessarily understand why the opposition was spending so much of their time on that. And so I guess I'm just asking you, and I have, I think, time for one more question, if you could provide your thoughts, your comments on that. At 1.3 or somewhere in that range, you had already called in the OPP. Good move. Of course, at 2.5, the same thing would have happened. It would have just disclosed even further egregious behavior. So I wonder if you'd want to...
So the chain of events, I learned what the compensation was. I ordered a forensic audit. That forensic audit reported back, and then, but they reported back not on the compensation issue, they reported back on other goings-on within Ornge. That's what I thought deserved the attention of the OPP. So you're absolutely right. Is there anything different I would have done? Any different actions? No, absolutely not. And in fact, when the ministry officials reviewed the findings of the forensic investigation, they lined it up with what steps had already been taken, and they found there were no more actions that needed to be taken as a result of the forensic investigation. Had there been further actions, they would have briefed me on what those further actions ought to be.
My last question, and I don't know if we'll have time for one more, but my last one, I want to go to, we're spending a lot of time on the financial side. And I mean, most of us, well, all of us agreed there were issues there, and the OPP are dealing with that. I want to talk a bit about the operational side of Ornge and where we are today. I mean, it's in a lot of people, the Ornge and air ambulance services are obviously provided throughout the province, but I think as a northerner, many of us certainly feel like we rely on these services, perhaps to a greater degree than other areas of the province. And so I want you to have a minute to respond to issues related to safety and staffing and where we are today relative to where we may have been 3 and 5 years or 6 years ago, because that's still not even really clear to me. But as a northern member, I am very much interested in where we are today from your perspective in terms of the safety of the operation of Ornge, in terms of their ability to respond to emergencies, either with fixed wing or with rotary. Today, here we are, or over the course of the last couple of years since the changes have begun at Ornge.
Sure. Orange's budget is $152 million. That number has been frozen since 2011. I do meet with the chair and the CEO regularly. I think I meet with them next Monday for an update on what's happening at Ornge. I can tell you they are absolutely committed to measuring how well they are doing on metrics that matter to patients. You're absolutely right when you say Ornge is, the people in the north look at Ornge as their lifeline because of geography. In particular, people in the north rely on Ornge. They are very proud of the work that Ornge does. And, you know, I've spent time with people in the north who have firsthand experience with Ornge, and they have nothing but enormous gratitude for the services that are provided at Ornge. So the senior leadership at Ornge is ensuring that there is appropriate staffing. As you know, there's been an expansion at Thunder Bay so that there's more service available for the people in the Northwest. They report on response times. They report on system issues. And I have to say that Ornge is now really taking a lead in developing a more integrated critical care response system for the people of Ontario to make it even faster for people who've been critically injured to get to the care they need. I think it's important that most people think of Ornge as responding on scene, but in fact over 90% of Ornge's flights are transfer of patients from one facility to another facility. But those critical incidents where you need a response quickly, you need to get the patient to the right place as quickly as possible, Ornge is really driving some system change to make that even better for patients.
Ms. Jasek?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Cleese, in his opening remarks, referred to some sort of standing orders that this committee has in terms of document release. I'm only aware of a succession of motions to ask the ministry to release various documents at various times. Would you agree that that's the way you perceive how this committee
That has been my understanding, that this committee has made a number of motions, as I say, requested 2 million documents and received 2 million documents. Ornge and the ministry take requests from committee very seriously. If you lined up all of the documents, you'd get to Montreal, from here to Montreal, with documents supplied to this committee. I think the ministry and Ornge have been very responsive to the requests from this committee.
And so further to that, you have agreed to table any further information related to Chris Mazza's earnings in a comprehensive format. You alluded to earlier that you would be happy to do that. So
Absolutely.
can we, again, hear that assurance that in the spirit of openness and transparency, that whatever information you have that is requested by this committee, that the ministry, Ornge, will obviously do their very best to provide all that we require.
I think it's important that there be clarity around that issue, because I think there's and I understand when you get as many documents as you've received, it can be onerous to go through them and organize them. So that, I believe, is the request from committee, that there be a summary document that wraps up information requested by this committee with regards to compensation. And as you will recall, it was MPP Sandals who actually asked for all the compensation, because as you were hearing about compensation, it became clear that there were different sources. So the request was for all information, salaries, stipends, expenses, bonuses, loans, everything be provided to committee. That has been provided to committee, and the work is underway now to consolidate that into one summary.
Do we have any time left?
Yes, you have a minute left.
Okay, so, Minister, I think we were all really horrified to learn of the crash up in Moosonee. 4
Yes.
crew members died. And I just wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about your personal reaction when you heard about that and actions that you took.
Well, obviously, devastating news. I was able to attend 3 of the 4 funerals and the memorial service. I spoke to parents, wives, children of people who had been killed. I mean, any safety issue is taken extremely seriously. The Transportation Safety Board is undertaking an investigation, and the people at Ornge were as devastated. I mean, this is a terrible tragedy for that Ornge family, and any steps that need to be taken to further enhance safety are being taken.
Thank you.
Yes, and just the clerk will clarify that it's Standing Order 110B that the committee operates under.
Yeah, so just, it's not the committee's standing orders. We operate under the standing orders of the House. So when there's a document request or a motion presented in the committee to ask a ministry or an agency to provide documents, it's under Standing Order 110B, which states that except when the House otherwise orders, each committee shall have power to send for persons, papers, or things.
And
So,
that has been complied with.
correct.
Very
So
well.
just to be clear, Mr. Cleese was wrong when he said there was a standing
No, I
order?
think it's just a misinterpretation of 2 different words. The standing order was used by the House, by the committee, in order to put forward the motion to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care.
Yes, so thank you very much for coming before the committee this morning, Minister.
pleasure.
Again, and hopefully it's the last time. Thank you very much, and
Thank
we're
you.
recessed until 12:30 this afternoon.